All right, can everybody see my screen? If not, feel free to unmute right now and let me know. But I think we should be good. Okay.
I've got the the pictures of participants over on the view is covering the part of the screen.
Is it this, the presenter view is over it?
Or
Or
it's
what's over
the
it?
participant view. Maybe I can just move it over. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No, no worries. All right. So Dan, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, so we're gonna kick it off by just giving the basics of redistricting, make sure everybody's kind of same baseline level of knowledge. I know some folks may know it, other folks are maybe getting reacquainted with redistricting since it happens only every 10 years. So I'm just gonna kick off with that. What is redistricting? So redistricting is the process of redrawing voting districts so that every district has the same every district of the same type has the same number of residents in it. So the US Constitution requires that districts must be as equal in population as possible. There's a little bit more flexibility in terms of population deviation, maybe like county level, state level districts. For Congress, it's got to be pretty tight, pretty much to the person. The goal of population equality is to make sure that each legislator represents the same number of people, so you have equal representation in the halls of power. The rule of drawing districts with equal population applies to all levels of government, as I mentioned. That includes congressional districts, state legislative districts, county level government, city, and even school board districts. At the congressional level, just something to note, districts must be redrawn regardless of whether a state gains, loses, or keeps the same number of districts as a result of apportionment in the census. Obviously over time, over the course of a decade between each census, people move, children are born, people pass away. This means that some places have population growth, others have decreases in population. Because of this, districts become uneven in size during the course of a decade. So every 10 years, the federal government counts everyone in the country during the census, everyone who lives here. After the census is finished, the district boundaries must be redrawn to even out the number of people in each district, and that's the redistricting process. Although redistricting is absolutely essential to ensure that people have equal representation, unfortunately, as many of you I'm sure are aware, it can be manipulated for political advantage or just done badly in a way that doesn't represent our communities well. There are two primary methods for sort of bad behavior in the redistricting space, two tactics, I guess, packing and cracking. Packing is when map drawers place as many like-minded voters as possible in as few districts as possible. So these voters, might have one or two districts in which they can elect their preferred candidate by overwhelming margins, but those margins are more than are needed to elect the community's preferred candidate and prevent those voters from having any influence in the rest of the jurisdiction, the rest of the districts surrounding it. Cracking is when people from a certain group are divided among as many districts as possible to ensure that they have no ability to significantly influence the outcome of an election in any one district. So these are the twin evils of redistricting. So moving to the next slide, let's talk a little bit about why redistricting is important. It's important because it plays a significant role in determining whether voters can hold elected officials accountable for their actions on election day for an entire decade. It can also determine whether constituents, voting and non-voting alike, have an elected official representing their interests in the halls of power. Districts that are drawn with the goal of keeping communities together instead of benefiting incumbents or one political party can ensure that an elected official will pick up the phone when those communities need a helping hand. So then I think I'll pass it over to Natalia to talk a little bit about how redistricting works in New York.
Thank you, Dan. So with that said, how do we approach redistricting in New York? And I'm sure some of you have maybe even seen this, but here are some of New York's greatest hits. As I'm sure you are aware, New York has some of the most notorious and bizarrely shaped districts in the country. on the left here, we have the famous upside down swan, which is Senate District 20, which right now is represented by Senator Zellner Myrie. And on the right, we have New York's 8th Congressional District, which is currently represented by Congressman Hakeem Jeffries. So I don't think it's news to anyone that these districts are not how districts should be drawn. It's pretty evident from the maps. We do not want this, and this is why our work is super important. And after the census, we now know that New York is also going to lose an additional congressional seat, which just amplifies how important this work really is. So in terms of who draws the district in New York, in 2014, New Yorkers voted to establish a advisory commission, which is formerly known as the New York Independent Redistricting Commission, which is comprised of 10 members. The Senate and Assembly majority and minority leadership each appoint 2 members, and the first 8 members of the commission are then selected by a majority vote. And then the final 2 commissioners are also appointed, and they cannot be part of the 2 major parties, or cannot have been part of the 2 major parties in the past 5 years. The upcoming redistricting cycle will be the first in which the New York Commission is operational. And there are some rules as to who can serve on the commission. Within 3 years prior to appointment, the commissioners cannot have been state legislators, members of Congress, statewide elected officials, state officers, employees, or legislative employees, registered lobbyists in New York, or political party chairs. There are also some rules that apply to commissioners' spouses. For example, within 3 years prior to appointment, commissioners' spouses cannot have been a state legislator, member of Congress, or statewide elected official. So these folks are going to be drawing our district lines, and we will also drop a link in the chat towards the end of the presentation to a link about all of the commissioners. So if you want to read up more about their qualifications and who they are, you can definitely find that information in the chat. I will drop that a little bit. So for the outline of how the redistriction commission actions are going to shape out, unfortunately, due to COVID-19 and a lot of different factors, the commission is on a really tight schedule due to delays in the census, delays in funding allocation, delays in confirmation of commission members. The commission is really fighting the clock. The commission hearing should have been started in June, but we are now only starting them at the end of July. And this is the first set of hearings. So these hearings will be focused on getting the public input about community maps and current district lines and what should change, what should be improved. So this is really an opportunity for everyone, activists, voters, anyone to come together and really share their input with the commission. The commission will then have until September 15th to draw preliminary district maps, and then they will release them to the public. The maps must be available for 30 days at the minimum before the next set of public hearings, which will also be obviously open to the public. You can attend these and testify on behalf of your community to voice concerns about the proposed district lines. So there will be another opportunity to testify other than the meetings or the hearings that are happening right now. Yeah, and then the maps will be submitted to the legislature by January 15th. for the first round of voting. If the first plan is rejected, the commission can submit a second proposal in February. And then if the legislature rejects the maps one more time, it is now in the hands of the legislature to draw the maps. So here is the schedule of the public hearings that have been announced. 2 of them have already, well, one of them has passed, and then Thursday, July 22nd, which is Queens County's hearing, is at 2 o'clock on Thursday. In order to testify in that hearing, you had to have submitted testimony by 2 o'clock today. So it's 24 hours in advance is the deadline for submitting testimony. However, there will be another date announced at the end of August. It will be like a catch-all hearing where anyone from any region in New York can attend and testify and voice their concerns. So if you are in Nassau, Suffolk County, or Queens County and you haven't submitted testimony, but you really want to, you still have the opportunity to do so. And we will obviously keep all of you up to date on that. As soon as we know that date, we will send out an email reminding everybody and encouraging you to sign up. So if you missed the first or missed the Nassau and Suffolk County hearing and didn't submit for Queens, you will still have an opportunity to do so. And then obviously there will be a second round of hearings once the draft of the maps are released. So how can you get involved? There's a lot of different ways you can organize. You can draw your own maps and you can present them. You can testify at hearings. You can advocate on behalf of your community. You can reach out to your commissioners from any of them really, and talk to them, express your concerns. You can lobby your representatives. All of these things are very important. And if the commission doesn't hear from you, then that's an opportunity wasted. So today we're going to specifically focus on drawing your own maps, or rather mapping out your community of interest maps. And Dan will explain in a second what those are. And then testifying at hearings. So why testify and what exactly does that entail? So for the public hearings that are happening right now, everybody will be given an opportunity to testify virtually. You get 3 minutes at a time, per person rather, to express concerns. And an effective testimony really is your opportunity to tell your own story. So some of the building blocks for a successful an effective testimony are establishing credentials. So you want to let the commission know who you are. You want to identify the critical point. So this is your basic argument. It needs to be loud and clear. You want to tell a story, make it personal. If you make a testimony personal, it is much more likely to resonate with the commission. Provide evidence and list consequences. So is there a current district line that splits a community? Or is the proposed map going to split a community? This is your moment to say, you know what, this district line splits up a community. This is why, and this is why it's impactful. We don't want to split up communities. We want to keep communities together because that's how we get representation for everyone. And then there's a specific ask. In your testimony, you have to make an ask as to what you want the commission to do about the issue that you've outlined. So you can testify, you can submit written testimony, or you can testify virtually, rather, not in person. When you testify in person, you should not read what you have written. So obviously you will provide written testimony and then also present it if you're testifying in person before the commission. However, it should be a summary of what you're expressing in your written documents. It shouldn't just be a verbatim, like line by line. So preparing your testimony, some key parts. Introduce yourself, your organization, any coalitions that you work with. You can identify as a member of Common Cause or any other organization on behalf of which you're speaking out, or just as a citizen. Be clear on your goals for your testimony and community, letting the commission know why you are there. So again, you want to make sure that the commission knows why you're speaking out on an issue that you are, what is your concern, tell a story, make it personable, make it about you. That really will drive your point and make the commission likely to listen to you. Define your community. So a community of interest, and Dan will talk about this a bit later in the presentation, is something that you want to present to the commission. You want to talk not just about the entire district, you want to talk about specifically your community. Ask for a specific solution. So if there's a district line that already splits up a community, or there's a threat that a district line will split a community, you can propose an alternative solution to that. Use your notes if necessary. Obviously, it's hard to speak without notes, and it keeps us all focused. So use notes when you testify. There's no rule against that. So on the right-hand side, we have a little tiny blurb that kind of opens up a testimony. How can you open up a testimony? Hello, committee. My name is Natalia. I've been a resident of this neighborhood for 5 years. I'm here with a group of my neighbors and or a neighborhood coalition, and I would like to urge the committee to keep my community together. So that's a very good way to open it up. You can also say, I'm here on behalf of my neighbors and my community. You don't have to actually come with a group, but if you can, that's great. So preparing your testimony, some tips to consider. Your testimony should include evidence, and it can be quantitative or qualitative evidence. We will go over one key component of evidence, which is your own maps, in just a second, but you have the opportunity to make your testimony personal and community centered, while also providing that quantitative and qualitative data. Share your concerns, share any negative outcomes that could happen if maps change or remain the same. You want to make sure the commission knows why exactly there is harm in a proposed action, or there currently exists some abnormality and some injustice in the current map that represents your area. Be concise and courteous. You only have 3 minutes to deliver testimony, so be straight to the point, be respectful of the commission, and you will succeed. So back to you, Dan.
Okay. So a little bit later, we're going to get into a free program that was designed by some folks at Tufts University, their metric geometry and gerrymandering group. It's called Districtor or District R. But sort of, so it's designed to allow kind of people to draw their own community maps, draw district maps. But I think before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about kind of the philosophical underpinnings of sort of, why you do that and kind of how to go about it. Let's talk a little bit about sort of why you would draw your own maps. I think traditionally nobody's bothered to ask people who live in each community or neighborhood what binds their community together. Often redistricting is done in a top-down way with a real focus on protecting incumbent interests, political party interests. But we know that keeping communities together gives us a stronger voice in government, and community mapping is crucial to that. So why does community mapping matter? First, mapping communities can serve as the building blocks for drawing the districts in a jurisdiction. Second, by collecting and telling community stories, we can really center our communities in redistricting. So we're not an afterthought, but considered from the very beginning. Community mapping can also make a difference in how the lines are drawn, possibly persuading those who have the power to draw the lines, like lawmakers, or in this case, commissioners, to consider our communities. And, it may turn out to be incredibly important evidence for judges to consider if the maps are challenged in court. I mean, that happened in the last cycle in New York, where the legislature couldn't agree on congressional districts, and unity maps put together by a bunch of different organizations in the state were essentially adopted by the court. So hugely important. So the first piece of this is really to define your community. An important component of effective testimony is really doing that with specificity. Like I said, we're going to demonstrate one way you can do that a bit later, but that means explaining your community's unique qualities and defining community boundaries clearly and specifically. In addition, telling decision makers why you care about redistricting and community mapping is key. I think one way to kind of conceptualize this with specificity is what we've been calling the 3 C's. So that's culture, which is the many things that add up to the character of a community. Concerns, these are issues that require attention from the government, that need more resources or attention. And count, which is the data that can strengthen the narrative we're telling about our communities. So what is community mapping? We kind of lay it out right there. It's pretty straightforward. This is when a group of people who live generally in the same neighborhood literally put themselves on the map by identifying who they are, what makes their community special, showing what the specific boundaries of that community are, and describing what their shared interests are that demonstrate why they should be kept together in one voting district. And what is a community of interest? So some states will define it very clearly. The New York Constitution requires that the State Redistricting Commission, quote, shall consider the maintenance of communities of interest, end quote. But it doesn't actually define the term, nor do the New York courts. But on the screen, I think you can see one definition that captures it pretty nicely. That it's a community of interest is a neighborhood or area whose residents have shared culture, history, and policy concerns, and so would benefit from being represented in the same district. I think it's not nice and broad, and because we think ultimately that communities of interest should be defined by people testifying to decision makers. So let's dive in just a little bit more into the 3 C's I alluded to a couple slides ago. These are kind of a good way of thinking about how you can best describe why our community should be kept together in one district. Are there certain cultural ties that bind the people in your community together related to shared history, language, faith, celebrations, or values? Are there concerns related to the environment? Shared transportation routes, local schools, park space, maybe water sources? Is there data from the census that can lend credibility to the argument that you're making? Obviously for the 3rd C, count. This can include socioeconomic data from the census, population totals, specific sort of percentages of groups you believe should be kept together, distance to green spaces you seek to protect, available healthcare resources, or really any other hard data that backs up your claim. If you describe your community in terms of culture and or concerns and back up your claim with a count, you can ensure that your testimony is as compelling as possible. So that's the long and short of that. I don't know, Natalia, if you wanted me to go over to district or if we wanted to field any questions, whatever works.
So the second part of our training is we're going to show you how to use the free tool District R to map out your community and really conceptualize your community of interest, which will ultimately help drive your testimony to the finish point and serve as an effective advocate for your community. So I think what we can do is dive right into District R, and I will actually. Do you want to draw the map? And I will.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
I'll share screen on my own.
All right, perfect. And while you do that, I will add some links to the chat about the commission and some other.
So just to, starting at the website itself, districtr.org, what you'll do is start, find your state. You sort of a couple of forks in the road, drawing districts or drawing communities. We're going to focus on the drawing communities parts, but a lot of the same kind of tools, bells and whistles that you'll see on the community side is also in the district side. And just sort of before we really dive in, I'll also mention, kind of the way that we think about this working most effectively is that, what you have is, a small group of people. We have, I think it's not exactly scientifically precise how many, but 10 to 15 or so that really kind of live in a pretty close geographical area. And, it's really about a discussion. We're talking about what landmarks are important, what really define the community. And then proceed to kind of literally painting it and really having a discussion about whether certain census block groups make up that community or a different community. So, I'll try to recreate that with, sort of Natalia standing in as the, a group of several people, community coming together to talk these issues out. So usually I think what we try to do is we'll have one person who's a facilitator. I'll be playing kind of both roles since it's a little straightforward with just one person, but a facilitator to ask questions, listen intently about some themes, some locations that are coming out of the discussion from several different people. So because of that person, you really want them to focus on note taking and listening. We generally separately have a person whose job it is to actually kind of paint the map and plug in some of the qualitative descriptions that we're gonna go over right now. But like I said, I'll do both now. Natalia, I would start by tell me about where you live, what makes your community unique. How would you describe, first of all, where is it? Does it have a name? The neighborhood you're in? How would you describe it, like maybe a friend who was thinking of moving there?
Yes. So kind of an odd guinea pig for this one, just because I myself am new to the area where I now live. I just moved, but I live in New York City. Specifically, I live in Chelsea. Yeah, this is a cool redistricting district art tool that you can put it in. You can type up a community and it will kind of already take you there, or any other point of interest. So yes, here we are in Chelsea. Very, very vibrant district. There is a lot of art. There are art spaces here. A lot of great bars. It's a great area. Cool cultural hub for sure.
Cool. Well, let's start to identify. So what we try to do in this is to anchor our mapping in some specific landmarks, to start with that. So what you do, so you'll just show you some of the features here. So, you start with this little hand, and, that allows you to kind of drag the map around. It's pretty intuitive. It looks much like, Google Maps or Apple Maps, stuff that you're probably used to using. And as you can kind of see, you can plug in a neighborhood up in the search box, a specific location and address, whatever. And it's usually got a lot of stuff loaded up so that you can find it pretty quickly. So maybe we'll start, you mentioned sort of vibrant arts district, if you want to start with that, maybe some sort of center, arts related center or any park space, what's maybe one location that kind of anchors the community?
Definitely. So there is the Rubin Museum, which is in Chelsea. It's with an I. Yep. Rubin Museum of Art. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what we can do, like I said, as you can see, it goes to it. And so what you want to do is you can mark this as an important place. Click down here, new marker. We'll drop it right there on the Rubin Museum of Art. What we're going to come down here, we can name it if obviously just what it's called, or if it's something that's maybe a little more amorphous, we can give it its own name. But why don't you describe this, why you kind of see it as important to the neighborhood?
The museum has one of the largest collections of Asian art, and really, it like is in my opinion, it's almost in the center of Chelsea. It's one of the two go-to spots around here.
Okay. What other kind of location? Again, sort of, yeah, the museums, art spaces, park space, schools, education, wherever you got that really kind of makes up the neighborhood.
Yeah, sure. Let's see. So I was thinking that there's several streets that are like very crucial for commercial on the commercial side of things. So it's right we're right now on Reuben is on 17th, and if we look at that's 6th Avenue, so it's on the corner of 6th and 17th, and everything kind of up that way.
So here.
Yeah, like where that Marshall's is. There's some stores around there that folks go to get groceries. Like there's a Trader Joe's somewhere on that street.
Okay, so maybe we can call this sort of like kind of a business.
Yeah, business area. Mm-hmm.
So maybe like shopping, that's important to the community. So we can drop in, kind of your, again, sort of description of what this area is, why it's important to keep the neighborhood. We'll do one more and then we'll move to sort of the painting function again, and also maybe sort of transportation routes. Is there a subway station or whatever it might be? We'll do one last one and then move on.
Let's add Chelsea Park.
Okay. Let's see. What's that look like?
10th Ave.
Field,
Let's see.
Yeah,
let's see where that takes us.
Is that the one?
Nah, that's
no.
Or actually, wait, 28.
It's Chelsea Park.
Yeah, okay, never mind. Yep, we're good.
Okay. All right, so we'll do this last one. I dropped another point on it using important places. Put the place name here. So describe why this is really kind of important to the neighborhood.
One of the biggest parks in our area, I would say. That is like specifically inherent to Chelsea and not part of other like districts such as the Flatiron district. So I would say Chelsea Park is probably the largest Chelsea Park.
I'll project here.
That is also a assumption of mine. I might be very wrong.
Okay, so those are the kind of that's the landmark function. And like I said, we do that to sort of anchor, kind of anchor some spots that we can then use to fill in, to actually sort of paint areas. The beginning processes of actually, painting in a community. So what we do here is move over to the paint function. You can adjust the brush size. I think, the bigger brush sizes are really more for like, I think on the district mapping side, and what's more useful there when we're doing this very granular community level drawing. I think that the smallest brush size makes the most sense. So what we're going to start with is just clicking on the census block groups that make up that are sort of around surrounding the areas that we just identified. So let's see where else. Okay, and we're down here too, right? Okay, so we have the Reuben Museum, and that's where that shopping area was. So then really kind of the discussion begins within the group, right? We start to say like, okay, what else should be filled in? Because it's obviously New York City and very kind of packed in terms of people. They're very small census block groups, and there's kind of a lot to go over. I mean, so we would say, oh, do you think basically everything in between? And when Natalia, what do you think? Would you say like kind of basically sort of the rectangle and that consists of this?
So yeah, here's the thing. I would say that the area that I would highlight would be down where it says like High Line down to there, and then to circle back around to where we chose the Rubin Museum. So like all of those little blocks.
So up here, or is it
Uh,
down here?
those guys over here.
You think in between here?
Yeah, I think they connect over there.
Right. So, again, this will be, kind of a debate. People might have different ideas about whether, what fits and what doesn't. That's why, although, the tool is kind of easy enough to use for one person who kind of thinks they can do it on their own. I think it's really most effective if you have consensus with a fair number of people. And that's so we're just pretending to recreate that. So we'll say, maybe just say that it kind of arrived at something like this, or maybe.
Yeah, I would say that's actually pretty good.
And if you think, thinking something isn't quite right, there's sort of a change in the discussion. You can also use the eraser function, pause. So now this really dives into the meatpacking district, kind of a different thing. So you can erase that. So another function you have on the tool is if I'll go back over here to the painting section. If there's enough people who are kind of, maybe there's some people who are in some of the surrounding neighborhoods who have some strong ideas about what is not this community, but what constitutes a separate community, you can add a different color. It defaults to yellow next. And so you can also just say, oh, okay, well, this is, you have a discussion about some of sort of these areas. And so you can kind of identify nearby areas sort of being separate and distinct and kind of compare them to. So that's sort of how the community mapping part works. We move back over to the hand thing. We can then kind of, describe, we'll say, well, let's start with the community. It's actually the center of the discussion. So Chelsea, and kind of over, you sort of did this at the beginning, but what would be a kind of succinct way to describe this community that you want to get across to decision makers?
Good question.
You're still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I would say that like if I wouldn't honestly, so Nomad and Flatiron District share a lot with Chelsea, but they're technically separate. Like they're people from both say like, oh, Chelsea shouldn't like go too far up. It's a little like lower, closer to meatpacking and West Village, but so there's like some beef there. Why I would say it's important, there is a very very vibrant art scene still, and a very many crucial spots that are central to New York City's LGBTQ community as well. So that would be
okay,
a good description, I guess.
All right, that makes sense. And then, if we have folks who are sort of in the other communities, they can, kind of describe those as well. However, whatever works. Whatever. And so then you're basically done with the initial community mapping. And some of the things you can see after you've done that mapping is go to data layers over here, and kind of see where some populations are by race. You can look at maybe where the Black population is, and you can look at shaded regions are sometimes a little hard to see with the color there. So sometimes size circles are better. Oh, whoops, gotta do that part first. So you see some of the shaded circles coming in, not a lot. Or different folks, maybe slightly bigger Hispanic population and an Asian population. You can do this either for total population or for voting age population. You can look at a couple different groups together if you want to start to go the next level up, which to figure out are there a couple different groups that can kind of vote in coalition to have as much influence as possible. You can look at some evaluation tools, compare the demographics of the neighborhood you mapped out with the state as a whole. Either the, again, same thing for, you do that for voting age population. And you can do that for either of the communities you mapped out. And then, so that's that's the drawing part, that's the evaluation part. One of the things you can do to do this with other people in different locations is you hit the save button here. What that does is creates a unique URL that will save the map that you drew here. You can share with others. We can work with you to talk to the team at Tufts University to create a tag or event code. If it's, the Common Cause New York group, so all maps that are done in different locations around the city, around the state, are they're kind of kept together by the Tufts team. You can kind of put them all in one place, and then say, oh, this is whatever team is doing it in one place, so you can separate out which map was done by whom. The URL is a little bit like, think of it sort of like as a Word document that you attach to you attach to an email. It's kind of static, so the minute somebody makes any changes to it, a new URL is created, but your original work is saved. There are ways to export the data. District R is one of sort of several different programs, both paid and free, that are out there for people to do community or district mapping. A lot of the developers, fortunately, are kind of talking to each other and figuring out ways to make sure that if you produce something in District R, but maybe the commission is drawing in a different program, Maplitude, that you can export files and export this map in a way that commissioners can actually see it. So there's just a ton of different ways to do that. You can do a PDF if you just want to submit sort of a picture, or JSON is, I think, one of the files that is going to be kind of jointly shared easily between the different programs. So just a lot of different ways to do that. Yeah, I think that's kind of it.